I'm Jody, founder of the travel blog Family Travel Magazine and mom of 2 college students.
I'm Anna, owner of Waves and Wandering LLC, which is a full-service travel agency. I'm also mom to 3 daughters and grandmother to 3 grandchildren. Welcome to our show. Let's start this episode with a little chat about what we're doing, where we're headed, what we're up to. And Jody, you are about to go to Orlando.
I am headed on a media trip to Orlando. I'm super excited about it, although I've seen weather forecasts for this week, and I'm hoping that the weather improves a little bit, but I'm excited to get some sunshine.
I think people are surprised how cold it is in Florida right now.
I think so. It is cold everywhere, and that makes it challenging to kind of avoid the cold weather for travel. But I think in general, at least for me, I have very limited expectations for January travel.
Yeah, it's really hard to plan. But who could have planned if you had a beach vacation in Jacksonville that you would need snow boots today?
True.
We usually talk about places to visit. We talk about what to do when you get there. But today we're really going to get down to the nitty-gritty and talk about the stuff that you need to do before you actually go on vacation. These are definitely things you're going to want to jot them down, put them in your to-do list, make sure you've got some of these notes before you go away. And Jody is the person that I always go to with questions like suitcases and packing, and she's just a wealth of information. So I want to go right into how do we get started? We talk a lot about where we're going and what we're doing, but this is where we really get down to the how-to.
Yeah, so this topic will kind of assume that you've already planned your vacation. And now when you're in those kind of weeks before you leave, you haven't quite started putting your suitcases together, but you have the vacation on your calendar, you're starting to count down the days. And so what I want you to start with really is a packing list. And you may think that this is something that you want to do like right before you pack. But I think it's a good idea to know a little bit in advance of what you need to pack, because you may need to do some shopping beforehand. Now, as a parent, and I know you've experienced this too, you're going on a summer vacation or you're going on a warm weather vacation in the winter, and you realize all of your kids' summer clothes don't fit them.
Yes, and nothing is available in the store.
Right. So this is something you want to kind of plan for in advance. Think about what you're going to need. Are you going to need water shoes and those don't fit the kids? Or are you going to need water shoes and you don't have your own water shoes? That type of thing. So think about your packing list. Now, I understand, weather can change. So this isn't necessarily a definitive list of everything you're taking with you, but really just what do I think I'm going to need? What do I need to shop for? What do we need to try on? Do all of that well before you go, because you don't want to be out there at the mall the night before you go trying on clothes. And like you said, you may not see bathing suits in the store. So do you have a packing list that you use? I do. I have packing lists, and I can include a link to those in our Facebook group, and anyone can use them. Again, these may change based on your trip. So what I have is kind of a framework.
I think that's perfect, because I think it's overwhelming for a lot of people when they just sit down and they have their notebook or they have their computer in front of them and they don't even know where to start.
Yeah. It's good to have a starting point. And what I like to do with my packing list too is when my kids got to be a little bit older where they were responsible, I would give them their own packing list and let them pack and just put everything out on the floor. And then I would go through, obviously, and audit it and make sure we had the right stuff. But at least it gave them some ownership.
That was like a rite of passage in my house when the kids were big enough to take their own list and put their own stuff out. But even with my husband, you have to double check everything.
Definitely double check everything.
But what are you doing at home with, I know there's a lot that goes into making sure your house is ready for you to go away. So what do you do?
So this is something I do, not the night before, but a week or two before. Hold your mail. That's a big one. It is easy to do on the USPS website, but you might want to think about FedEx and UPS too. And what I try to do is I try not to order anything major during that time, because it can be a little tough to hold your mail. But in case anything does, slip through, it's also a good idea to tell a trusted neighbor that you're traveling. Have them just kind of take a peek out, as they drive by, make sure there aren't any big packages outside.
I think that's real valuable because there are times where you forget that something is still coming in from Amazon or wherever and you leave and you can't have it sitting on your step for, a week.
Right. You want someone that you trust to know that you're not going to be home and to have your contact information. I traveled one time and our sprinklers went off and didn't stop going off. And luckily we were not very far, but our neighbor had texted us and, we were going home that day, but we made sure we got home much earlier in the day.
My gosh.
So yeah, I think if I go on a longer trip, I also make sure that a trusted neighbor has a key.
Good plan.
Which is really helpful. If you have any pets, arranging pet care is important. And this might be more a thing you might want to do well in advance, because at least around here, the school vacation weeks, the week around Christmas, it's tough to get pet care, kennel care as you get closer. So arrange that as soon as you know your dates.
Yeah, that can be huge. And I think it's for a lot of our vacations, it's something that I didn't think about until the last minute. Now that my dogs are older, we generally have somebody come to the house so that they don't have to be disrupted in their routine. But I cannot tell you how many times I would call a kennel a week or two before Christmas or a week or two before spring break, thinking I'll be able to find someplace. And you would end up calling 6 or 7 and maybe not even getting one that you really trusted and wanted.
Right. It's really important to do that. And most places, if it's a busy week, they'll take a deposit, but typically it's not a huge commitment if you have to change things a week or so before.
Right. And appliances, stuff like that. Do you take any special care there?
I unplug things that can be unplugged. We have a shut off for the washing machine, which I shut off. So, that type of thing. If you have a door camera or, a doorbell camera, you want to make sure those have fresh batteries and are on, that sort of thing.
I always tell people, especially this time of year, if you're leaving and it's 11 degrees out, just leave a little trickle of water running somewhere so that your pipes are still working, because that can become an issue while you're away.
Yeah. And if you have like pipes underneath a vanity cabinet, leaving those open can be helpful. You might want to leave your washing machine ajar so that it doesn't get musty. So, make a list and just kind of go through your checklist. If you're the type of person who might be a little worried that you forgot to unplug things, it's always a good idea to just kind of snap a photo as you go around doing them, so that when you're on vacation and you think, oh no, did I unplug whatever, you can just go back and be like, yes, I did. I have a photo of it.
That's a great idea. And it saves you a ton of time from making that checklist and going through your house with the checklist, making sure everything is unplugged and turned off and everything.
Right.
What about flights? I know you've got some tips about getting ready for your flights and stuff.
Yeah. So I think, and I've seen this, I think you've seen it too, where flights seem to be changing a lot.
Yes.
A lot.
Yes.
It could be 10 minutes. It could be 3 hours. I think almost every flight I've booked over the past 3 years has changed in some way. So, and typically, because I use Flighty and TripIt, I get alerts on that stuff, but you just want to verify all your plans, check everything, make sure you've got the dates. Sometimes seating assignments change. I've had cases where the plane has changed from where it's 3 seats to 2. So go through, make sure you have your seating assignments. If you're a family that wants to be seated together, I highly recommend getting those seating assignments together and not hoping that people will move, because people are paying now for these seats and they're not necessarily going to want to move.
That's huge. And I know you've had personal experience where people almost expected you to give up a seat that you had paid a premium for.
Right. I mean, that's happened. One time I went to the restroom on a plane and came out and there was a man in my seat holding my purse because he was ready to have me move. And yeah, he had a similar seat to me, so I was more than happy to move, but I really wish he hadn't touched my stuff.
I know, that's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
I do not love that.
No, I wasn't thrilled about that. And it was a good lesson to not leave anything valuable in your seat, even if you are on the plane.
Yeah. I also think gone are the days where you can count on somebody giving a seat up because you're traveling with a little one and you want to make sure you're together, because A lot of the times now, if you're booking just a basic economy fare, you don't get to choose your seat unless you pay for it. And if you
Right.
don't pay for it, you might have your 3-year-old sitting 5 rows behind you.
Yeah, I mean, I had a case where we have a family of 4, so we took 3 seats and then the aisle seat. So we were 4, but with an aisle. And I got on the plane and my kids were quite young at this point. And I got on the plane and there was a lady in my seat. And, I mentioned it was my seat. And she said, well, because you're alone, I was hoping you'd move.
Yeah.
But she didn't realize it wasn't alone.
Yeah.
And so you just shouldn't assume that somebody is going to move.
Especially when people now are paying upwards of $50, $60, even $90, choose the seat they want to sit in. Do not expect those people to get up because you have little kids with you. It's not fair to ask somebody to do that.
Right. Absolutely. So check those seating assignments. And
For
then
sure.
while you're doing that, look at your travel documents. So if you need a passport, your driver's license, just check the expiration dates on these things. And with a passport, if you're traveling internationally, you want to do that really, really, really early because obviously that's not something you can turn around quickly. But I have known people and traveled with people who have tried to travel on an expired driver's license. It did not go well. So you want to make sure you have all that stuff, make sure your credit cards aren't expiring, all of that.
Yeah. And I think this is another, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you're traveling internationally, check those credit cards and make sure that they don't have transaction fees, international transaction fees, because that can add up very quickly.
Yeah, for sure it can. And going back to travel documents, we started taking pictures of all of our things. I have pictures of everybody's passport. I have pictures of birth certificates, because heaven forbid something gets lost in your journey, which
Absolutely.
We had that happen to us where we were taking my stepmom on a cruise with us, and she had all of her documents in a manila envelope and left the envelope somewhere in the airport that we never found. So fortunately for her, the cruise line was able to let her on board the cruise using her current driver's license and a copy of an expired passport that someone took at home. But you need to have all of your non-expired documents, like just take pictures of them all so that you have them.
Yeah, and it's really helpful too if you lose it to get it back, to get a replacement.
Yeah. And you talked about some apps that you use. What are some other apps that you like to have?
TripIt and Flighty are two of the big ones I have. TripIt will actually manage all of your travel information, and you can either send it to them through their email address, or they can actually scrape your email and pull any confirmations. But I find that to be really helpful. Flighty, I have kind of as an add-on to TripIt, and that gives me alerts about my flights. And so I find that to be really helpful. Another one I use, and this is only for international travel and only when I am traveling with people who don't have global entry, is the Mobile Passport, it used to be a privately owned app. It is now a government-owned app. And the name might be a little misleading because it leads you to believe that it is actually a mobile passport. You still have to have your passport, but that allows you to put your information into the system as you land, so you don't have to wait in the same long line that everybody else has to wait in.
That's pretty convenient.
Yeah, and it's free.
And what about things like the hotel apps or even apps for your destination, like the My Disney Experience app or your cruise ship app?
Yeah, any of the, so I like to have all of, and I typically on my phone will have all of the major, like I have the Marriott Bonvoy app, the Hilton Honors app, IHG app. Those are helpful. It's helpful to have your your hotel confirmation information in those, because you can often get a virtual key or a mobile key. I don't rely on those, but it's nice to have in case you realize, you've just forgotten your key in the room. And those are also, you're getting points if you use those programs.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's also a way you can order food. Depending on the hotel, you can order food. You can contact the front desk. So definitely, if you're traveling to Disney or taking a cruise, you'll want to have those apps, and just make sure that your reservations are actually loaded on those before you go.
Yeah. I love the mobile key thing, especially if you're arriving really late and you've
Right.
got little kids and you just want to get into your room. You don't want to have to be bothered with the whole check-in and, do everything like that.
Yeah, it can be really helpful.
Mail call, question stories, let's hear it all. From you to us, it's wonder and chat. So grab a seat, let's talk just like that.
We have a ton of questions on this topic, mostly because I have relied on you for things like picking out my bento bag and stuff like that. So how do you decide what type of luggage you're bringing?
Yeah, it's challenging because you want to pull out the luggage before you start packing, but then when you start packing, you realize you need more luggage. So I'll typically, consider like how long the trip is, if I want to carry on or if I want to check, and then how many people are going. And so, we have a good idea of generally how many suitcases we need for a trip. But I have a combination of hard side and soft side luggage. I think I'm kind of moving more towards the hard sided luggage. I have a few from away. I also like base. Those are, easy to pack, and they might be a little bit heavier than a soft sided suitcase, but I've found that they're a little more durable.
Does the destination determine which type of luggage? Like if you're doing, a trip to Florida or the Caribbean where it's mostly lightweight stuff, do you rely more on a heavier, hard-sided suitcase, or does that matter at all? Does the destination matter at all?
It doesn't necessarily matter. I find like when we go on a beach vacation, we'll tend to pack a little bit less just because, we're in our bathing suits all day. You can rewear things for dinner. But yeah, it's more along the lines of just kind of what suitcases I want to bring and which ones we prefer. Everyone in my family has a preferred suitcase that they like. So,
and I love the tip that you gave, I think it was last week, about splitting stuff up. So
right.
At this point, you pretty much have 4 grown-ups traveling. How many suitcases for like a week-long trip?
For a week-long trip, it's probably 4 suitcases, and there's some combination of carry-on and checked associated with that. And so I think we would probably have either 1 large and 2 small, or 2 large and 2 small. And, we would split up all our stuff. So if luggage is lost, if one suitcase is lost, we don't lose one person's things. Yeah. But if we're doing carry-ons, we just make sure the carry-on has, the first day's clothes, essential toiletries that fit within the toiletry rule, bathing suits, if that's something we're going to just like jump in and immediately want to go into the water.
Right.
And then, we just kind of split everything else up.
And kind of hearkening back to your packing list, the checklist of things, how do you avoid overpacking?
Overpacking has been such a hot topic lately because we all do it, right? We can live off of the same pair of jeans for a week, and then we go on vacation and we need 12 pairs of jeans.
Yes.
I think, so I'm not a huge, I'm not super worried about overpacking unless it's somewhere where I have limited space, like a cruise. But, I'll typically remove like 2 outfits from my bag once I've got it packed, because did I really need that many dresses? Or, so I think, a lot of people will either rely on like one color scheme and then have a lot of things that mix and match, or, bringing all neutral bottoms so that you can mix and match more. I think the more you're relying on specific outfits where the top and bottom match but don't match anything else, the more difficult it is to avoid overpacking.
I try to do that. I try to almost across the board. I have black bottoms, black pants, black skirts,
Right.
black whatever, that I can mix and match tops. I also find for myself, if I pack too far in advance, I tend to overpack because I second guess what I've thrown in there. Like,
Right.
Do I need that extra pair of pants? What if I want to change into something between, lunch and dinner or whatever? So I think the more time I give myself, the worse it is for me.
Yeah, that's really true. And I think as you get closer, you start thinking like, oh, wait, maybe if I just have one more pair of pants, or, one of the things I'll do, especially if it's a warmer weather vacation, is I have these little packets of laundry detergent that is meant for the sink. And so, at least I know I can kind of wash something quickly. But yeah, always a little bit of an overpacker, I would say.
Are there packing tips specific to little kids that you recommend? I've seen all the hacks on TikTok, all the things you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think, with little kids, obviously you have a lot more stuff. And, there's a lot you can do. When my kids were super little, we actually shipped a box of stuff to the hotel that we stayed at. That included things like diapers and wipes. You can also order that stuff off of Amazon and have it shipped.
Mm-hmm.
If it's, stuff that's disposable or stuff that you don't need when you're home. I think, with little kids, you are going to need more changes of clothes. You are going to need some spare things. So, just don't worry too much about overpacking, but you want to keep things reasonable. And obviously, like little kid's outfit is going to take up a lot less space than like a huge sweatshirt or something. In terms of gear, think about ways that you can rent stuff, or, we used to travel with the inflatable booster seats, which we just tucked in the suitcase. That was so much easier. We had the stroller that doubled as a car seat, so that made things easier. So if you are a frequent traveler looking for those types of things that really can be used in multiple purposes, is really helpful.
How do you feel about some of these TikTok hacks that I have been seeing, like packing your kids' clothes in a shoe tree organizer so that there's one outfit in each pocket, or using packing cubes, which I know some people really, really rely on those. Do they help? Are they better keeping you organized? What do they do?
I love packing cubes when I'm going to more than one hotel. So when I go on these Adventures by Disney trips and we have 3 hotels, I'll literally have a packing cube or 2 for each hotel, and I'll stick a Post-it note with this cube for days 1 to 3 and this cube for days 4 through 6. I find that to be extremely helpful because then you're not having to unpack and repack your suitcase all the time.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, they can be space saving. They aren't necessarily space saving. So you have to buy the right kind of compression bag. But if you have a suitcase like in a way which already has some compression built in, you're probably not going to get a ton more. And of course, the more compressed items you put in a suitcase, the heavier the suitcase is going to be.
Right.
You can't get away from weight, right?
Right.
Some of the other stuff I think can be helpful, and it also can be over the top.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think whatever way makes you, feel comfortable that you've brought what you need to bring. And if that means shoe organizers, I personally probably wouldn't do anything like that because it just isn't how my brain would work.
Same. And I have a quick question about passports. Just a few months ago, it seemed like it was taking forever to get a passport. Do you know if that situation has gotten any better?
I've heard it's gotten better, but, it's hard to know, right? I mean, depending on when you're listening to this episode, it could be difficult again. So I think it's tough if you're a frequent traveler like we are. It's hard to find a pocket of time where you can be without. Yeah. Because when you send that passport in, you don't have it anymore. So, that's just, even regardless of whether it's taking a long time or not, that's something I think you really need to plan out.
I agree. And I don't think I've known for a lot of years that you need to make sure your passport has time left on the end. You can't just go to some of these foreign countries with a passport that's going to expire 2 days after you get home.
Right. You need to have, typically it's 6 months, but you should look at your destination. And and if you have kids, keep in mind their passports are only good for 5 years, not 10. So that 5 years goes by quickly.
It really does. So we have a question from last week's episode that I'm just going to throw out there. Why hasn't Jody ever gone to Alaska?
I have not gone to Alaska because I don't like cold weather.
That makes sense.
So when I plan my vacations, I always want warmer weather. Now, what I will say is that as I've gotten older, I think I've appreciated colder weather a little bit more. So maybe I will get to Alaska.
Or at the very least, you've got to go see like Greenland, Iceland, all the, Northern Lights places and stuff.
Definitely. I typically don't want to travel anywhere cold when I'm from a cold place. I don't ski. I don't do any like winter sports. And so I am like always chasing beaches and sun, but Alaska's definitely on the list.
Now let's dive into the latest travel news and updates, from exciting cruise announcements to must-know travel tips. Here's what's making waves this week.
In travel news, we really, really want to talk about those real IDs because it seems like it might really happen. We've for so long put it off. What's going on with real IDs?
Currently, the deadline is May 7th, 2025, this year. It has been pushed back so many times that I will say I went and got my real ID pre-pandemic, and it has since expired, and I've had to renew it. My gosh. It has continually been pushed out. So they really mean it this time. You are going to want to do it. I will say, having had two kids that kind of fairly recently got their driver's licenses, this is best to do when they get their permit. When you go to the DMV to do that, you can do the real ID process. It's a little bit more of a pain, but get it done.
Yeah. And I just want to ask you, because I know you have an opinion on this. I can't just use my passport.
So you can. And if you don't have a real ID, you will want to bring your passport. I don't recommend this because of some of the reasons we were just discussing with passports. You have to send that in when you get it renewed, and you are without it for a block of time. And you don't know if there's going to be a family emergency or some reason why you have to get on an airplane, but you don't want to rely on the passport. It's a nice backup if you don't have it, but getting the real ID should be your focus.
That's such a good point. I don't think that would have entered my mind because, I mean, it's, and again, I've had my driver's license for a really long time, and I've never had a time where I couldn't just go to an airport with my driver's license and go to Florida or go to, California, wherever I wanted to go in the United States.
Right. Yeah, don't rely on the passport because you're going to mail it in. We don't know how long it's going to take for you to get it back. And being without it, it could be an issue even if you don't have travel planned.
Yeah. And I'm just going to go over, if you haven't gotten your real ID yet, I'll just go into the process of it. And the very first thing that I want to recommend is that you make an appointment at your local DMV. Now, here in New Jersey, we have to make an appointment. You can't just walk in like you can for a lot of other DMV related tasks. You have to have an appointment for a real ID. And I think for the way a lot of people here, at least in Jersey, have done things, that's kind of a big deal because we haven't always had appointment options at the DMV. So definitely do that. The other thing you have to know is that you need 2 recognized pieces of ID that prove your residence. This is huge for a lot of people. And I want to say women especially, because even in this day and age, we tend to just have our husband's names on utility bills or on the phone bill or on things like that. You have to have ID in your name. And they don't want like a letter from your mom to your address. They don't want to know that you have a PO box at the local post office. They have to have a rental agreement that shows your name on it, that says you live where you live, a utility bill or a credit card bill that's in your name, not your spouse's name or not your roommate's name, your state driver's license. Yes, got you. They'll take your state driver's license. They'll take a bank statement or a tax bill, whatever kind of government communication that gets sent by first class mail. If the IRS sends you something, or if, your local government sends you something and it's in your name, you can use that as a recognized piece of ID. And I cannot emphasize enough that it has to be valid. Don't take an expired driver's license or something like that. It has to be current. Also, I don't know how this is working in other states, but in New Jersey, appointments are scarce. There are 30 real ID DMV locations, 30 DMV locations that will let you come in and do the real ID if they have appointments available. And right now, only 3 of them in our state does. So plan this out in advance. Do not wait until May the 6th and think you're going to walk in and get it done. Of the 3 in New Jersey that currently have appointments open, they are at least 4 weeks away from now. So make your appointments sooner rather than later. Do you know anything about how it's going in Massachusetts?
I was going to point out in Massachusetts, and this might be a state by state thing, but we can actually, if you are a AAA member, we can go to some AAAs for DMV related things, including real IDs.
That's really good to know.
It
That's
was
really good.
super helpful. So if you have kids, and they're going to need their real IDs too if they have driver's licenses. With my kids, what we did was we made them AAA members, which is always a good idea if you have drivers anyway. And then we went and got the real ID as part of their process through AAA. But at least here in Massachusetts, that was the quicker way.
Yeah, I think that would be a quicker way. And New Jersey's kind of dragged its feet on this real ID thing. So maybe that's why we don't have that option yet. But I could not believe when I looked this morning to go and see how available appointments were that there were only 3 agencies doing appointments right now. So this is not something that you can wait on.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify too, that the kids, I mentioned the kids need the real IDs. They only need the real IDs if they are required to have an ID at the airport. So depending on age.
Yeah. And I do want people to know that if you have an under 18-year-old that is going to require a real ID, or you want them to have a real ID, you can actually, I guess, confirm that they live at your house. They don't need to have a utility bill in their name. They don't have to have the same things that a grown-up does.
When I took my kids, I had to sign an affidavit that they lived with me, but that was because I had a real ID already. So they knew that my location had already been confirmed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is going to be complicated for places like New Jersey that hasn't really pushed the real ID thing. We did have a trial period where you could go before COVID, but once COVID broke out, they kind of stopped all of the real ID stuff. So this is going to be brand new for a lot of people in Jersey.
But the great thing about the real ID thing is that once you've done it, you've done it. So with me, like I mentioned, I think I got mine in January 2020. I just had to renew it a few weeks ago. And the renewal process for my license was the same as it always was. Send in money.
Awesome.
In Massachusetts, our licenses are good for 5 years and they can use the photo twice. So you only need a new photo every 10 years. All I had to do basically was send in the money and they mailed me the new license.
I love that they can reuse the photos because in my Jersey driver's license, I'm like 30 pounds thinner. So it's a beautiful thing.
I will be getting a new photo next time, but I was able to use my old photo.
Let's tell people about visa requirements for places that we as U.S. citizens have not needed visa requirements before.
Yeah, this is new. And I think it's really important to know because like you mentioned, we haven't typically needed visas for a good amount of travel that we can do internationally. And right now, we're required to get an electronic travel authority for the UK and Northern Ireland, which was required for travel after January 8th, 2025. So you will need to have that if you're planning on visiting any of those locations.
I just had a friend whose daughter went to England at the beginning of January. They were surprised, first of all, that they needed the visa to go, but she was going to need it by the time she got there. But it's also, in most cases, a super fast turnaround. You might have the approval in just a few minutes. Comes in an email. It might only take 15, 20 minutes. But if there's any kind of red flag or any missing information or anything like that, it could take 2 weeks or more. So that's something you want to do now rather than later.
Yeah, you don't want to have a trip planned and find out that you have not gotten this visa before you leave.
The other visa that is sort of coming, this is sort of like a real ID situation. It's been pushed back and pushed back. The ETIAS, I think people are saying it, ETIAS, I don't know, but it's the European Travel Information and Authorization System. Do you know anything about that?
I know it's been coming, and I think there was at one point where I was traveling to Europe, thought I might need to get one, but it has been pushed back. So it seems like it might be coming this year, but I don't know anything more about.
Yeah, I think they're still not committed to a date. They keep saying maybe mid 2025, but I recommend, at least to my clients, that if you're traveling, May, June, July, you want to definitely keep an eye on that. Check with your travel agent if you've booked through an agent, but definitely keep track of the possibility that this could be sprung on you.
Absolutely. Again, it's just one of those things where you don't, traveling is stressful enough. You want to make sure you have all your documentation ready to go.
And having just come back from several flights where they were asking for people to voluntarily check their bags and telling people that if you were in group 5, you weren't going to have a place to take your carry-on bag, I kind of welcome the standardization of carry-on luggage, which allegedly airlines are going to try and start enforcing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been to maybe 1 or 2 airports where those, we've all seen those sizers that they have. No one uses the sizers. I think I traveled through maybe 1 airport where one TSA agent was really encouraging people to use them. But most people don't know what the carry-on limits are for their airline, and most probably have no idea what size their suitcase is.
I don't.
Yeah. And sometimes too, we talked about soft-sided versus hard-sided luggage. If you have a soft-sided suitcase, the size will vary, and some of them zip out and create an extra bit of space. So these are things you're going to want to watch out for, because no one wants to be that person with their suitcase wide open at the airport trying to shuffle things. I haven't heard a whole lot of enforcing, or I haven't seen a whole lot of enforcing live, but it's definitely something to pay attention to.
Yeah, one of the things that surprised me that they are claiming they're going to start enforcing is the weight of your carry-on luggage. And I have to be honest and say that I did not know that was a thing. I thought if I could lift it up over my head and get it in the overhead compartment, I was good to shove whatever I wanted into it. But now they are going to start restricting you to 20 pounds, and they're going to ask to weigh your carry-on bag. I am in so much trouble.
This is another case where it's a good idea to have one of those portable scales that kind of slide onto the handle, and you can just see that at home, because this, again, isn't something you're going to want to be unpacking while you're sitting, on the ground in the airport.
I've been that person. Several times I've been that person.
It's not fun.
It's not fun. But I think part of this is really good for people in general. I know that there's a lot of people out there that are saying, no, this is just because the airlines want to make sure that you're checking your bags and paying the checked bag fees. But it's really becoming a problem in bringing a carry-on bag. Everybody has carry-on bags now.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people have a lot of carry-on bags too, right? So there's that limit that's not airline enforced, but FAA required, of 1 carry-on bag, 1 personal item. I saw a woman try to get on a plane with like 4 carry-on items. It was like, this one's duty free and this one's, just a purse. Those crossbody bags that are really popular, those count as a bag. That's a big one.
I admit that I am one of those. For the longest time, I just assumed a crossbody bag or something like a fanny pack. I mean, it's not really a bag. It's so tiny, you can't really hold anything. But now I know that I have to pack that into my carry-on bag so that I can actually get it on the plane.
Right. And I mean, I use those bags. I think they're super convenient for travel, but even if you want to keep it on your body as you go through the airport and grab a snack or whatever, as long as you tuck it into your carry-on bag before you get on the plane. Thank you so much for joining us. Next, we are going to talk all about travel dupes, which is a huge trend for 2025. So join us then.
Thanks for tuning in to Wander and Chat. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts. Subscribing means that you will never miss an episode, whether it's our weekly chats or some surprise bonus content when the travel bug takes us off schedule. Stay in the loop and be the first to hear all about the travel tips, news, and stories that we have to share. And while you're at it, we'd love it if you left us a quick rating or review. It really helps us find more listeners like you and to fine-tune our content so you like it better. Thanks for your support and happy travels.